enjoy and join me as we begin our fun and interactive class.
Before we start, let us first pause for a while for our opening prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for another day. As we begin our class today, may you shower every learner with your loving grace. We ask for your guidance so that we would be able to finish our classes very well. Give them more motivation and inspiration to be more attentive in our lessons. Shower them with your wisdom so that they will be able to answer the upcoming learning activities very well. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, for our lesson for today, here are our lesson's objectives. Number 1. Understand the meaning of disaster. 2. Justify the different kinds of disaster that are common in the Philippines. 3. Observe surroundings and every situation that you may encounter. 4. Appreciate the significance of knowing disaster risk and how it may affect one's life. When you are still in junior high school, you have learned that our country, Philippines, has experienced from an inexhaustible number of deadly earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and other natural disasters. This is due to its location along the Ring of Fire, a large Pacific Ocean region where many volcanic eruptions and earthquakes occur. Let us now check if you still remember what you have learned before. Using the game 4 Pick 1 Word, let us try to identify the different pictures that will be flashed on the screen. A hint will be given to help you in recognizing the picture. You will be given 10 seconds to guess the word. Are you ready? Let's begin. First picture. It is a giant rotating storm that brings wind, rain, and destruction. Time's up! The correct answer is typhoon. Did you get it right? Very good. Second picture. It is the sudden movement or trembling of the Earth's tectonic plates, resulting in shaking of the ground. Time's up! The correct answer is earthquake. Did you get it right? Bravo! Third picture. The movement of a mass of rock, debris, or earth down a slope. Time's up! And the correct answer is landslide. Did you get it correct? Excellent! Next picture. It is a series of waves caused by earthquakes or undersea volcanic eruptions. Time's up! And the correct answer is tsunami. Did you get it right? Outstanding! Next picture. It is an occurrence in which something burns. Time's up! And the correct answer is fire. Did you get it right? Superb! Next picture. It is the unlawful use of force or violence against person or property to intimidate or coerce a government. Time's up! And the correct answer is terrorism. Did you get it right? Great job! From the previous photos that you have seen, what have you observed? Are the pictures similar to each other? How or why? Now, the similarities that you have observed in the previous pictures is known as disaster. Can you now define the word disaster in your own words? What is disaster? Now, from these two pictures, can you identify the difference? today's lesson, we will be dealing with the basic concept of disaster and disaster risk. Before we begin in our lesson proper, here is a video clip which shows the scenario or situation that happens in our country for the year 2020. Note that, after watching the video, there will be a set of questions for you to answer.
Jungle.
Land, domestic air, and domestic sea travel to and from Metro Manila shall be suspended beginning March 15, 2020 and to end on April 14, 2020.
Sana kaya lang yung current ng tubig, hindi ko na kaya eh. Mayang malakas na pagpapunta na rito, kaya hindi na kaya. Dahil lampas na ng bewang sa looban ng kanyo, halos katip-tip na yung tubig. Kaya lumilikas na, dito na lahat sa eskwelahan.
Yan po ngayon yung ilog dito sa ano.
Guide questions. Number 1. What is the video all about? 2. What did you feel while watching the video? 3. Can you recall a real-life scenario where you have experienced this kind of disaster? Share your own experience. 4. Can these disasters affect one's life? How? 5. Why is it important to study about disaster? For you to further understand our lesson, let's proceed to the disaster. There are two pictures presented. The first picture is called as hazard. The second picture is called as disaster. Now, what do you think is the difference between the two? The first picture shows the existence of fire. However, as you can see, the fire is not yet destroying other objects or properties to be exact. While, on the second picture, the fire already poses a great damage in one's property. In the picture, the whole house was in flames. Now, let us define both terms. Hazard. Hazard is a potential source of harm. In the picture, the hazard is the fire. Disaster. Disaster is a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or a society. In the picture, the fire destroys the house. Note that failure or neglect to intervene or give action to hazard can lead to the occurrence of disaster. Let us now move on to the basic definition of disaster. Disaster is a sudden, calamitous occurrence that causes great harm, injury, destruction, and devastation to life and property. Always remember that when we are talking about disasters, these are the events that are unexpected, and two factors are greatly affected. It is the life and the property. In addition, Food and Agriculture Organization FAO 2008 added that in order to be classified as disaster, it should exceed the ability of the affected community or society to cope using its own resources. Disasters are often a result of the combination of: the first one is the hazard. There must be the presence of the main agent that will cause harm. The second one is the vulnerability. It is the state of susceptibility to harm from exposure to stresses. And the last one is the insufficient capacity or measures to reduce or cope with the potential negative consequences. Analysis. The picture shows the flood brought about by Typhoon Rolly way back 2020. From the given picture, let us try to identify the contributing factors that made this situation to become a disaster. The first one is the hazard. Can you identify the hazard in the picture? Yes, it is the water from the flood. How about the vulnerability? Who is vulnerable in the picture? The children. How about the insufficient measures to cope? It is the high elevation of the rainwater that makes the house sink. This leaves the residents no choice but to evacuate the location. Let's try to analyze this one. The picture depicts COVID-19 pandemic. What do you think is the hazard in this situation? Yes, it is the presence of SARS-CoV-2. How about the vulnerability? Who is vulnerable in the picture? The IATF concluded that those individuals below 18 and above 6 years old are vulnerable. In this picture, the child is vulnerable. If in any case, if the father has a medical condition or has a poor immunity, therefore, he may also be considered as vulnerable. How about the insufficiency to cope? Is it evident? As far as we know, currently, COVID-19 disease is not treatable. From this picture, what do you think will happen if the situation is left neglected? The child and the father might get sick. Both of them will be isolated. The father will not be able to go to work. The father might experience depression. In worst scenario, they can die due to COVID-19.
Other impacts of disaster may include loss of life, injury, disease, negative effects on human physical, mental, and social well-being, damage to properties, destruction of assets, loss of services, social and economic disruptions, and lastly, environmental degradation. Now, let us proceed to the two basic classifications of disaster. Disasters can be classified as natural disaster and man-made disaster. From the name itself, can you guess the definition of the two basic classification of disasters? Let us first focus on the first one, natural disaster. This disaster is basically caused by natural forces. It is sudden or unexpected, and it can lead to tremendous effects, affecting life and property. This classification of disaster can be subdivided into two categories. It can be a rapid onset disaster or a progressive onset disaster. Do you want to know more about these two categories? Let's begin by discussing rapid onset disaster. Rapid from the word itself means fast, or ideally it occurs in a shorter period of time. With this category of disaster, its effects can be tremendous, meaning it can cause a great damage to life and infrastructure or property. Majority of the time, it does not give any warnings at all. The damages brought about by this disaster can be quantified by the loss of human lives and property. Examples of rapid onset disaster: earthquakes, landslides, volcanic eruptions, floods, typhoons, and lastly, pandemics. Next, progressive onset disaster. Unlike rapid onset, this category of natural disaster requires a longer period of time to happen. As the word itself, progressive, meaning to say progress, or increasing the rate of severity of the upcoming situation happening as time passes by. This disaster is slow, and ideally, it is related to the environmental degeneration process. Since it is slow, people can still have enough time to prepare or take action for this foreseeable situation. Examples of progressive onset disaster: pandemics, climate change, rising sea level, and lastly, droughts. Now, we are done tackling about natural disaster. Let us now move on to the second category of disaster, which is the man-made disaster. So let us give it simple. Man-made disaster, from the name itself, is a disaster caused by humans. This disaster can be intentional or non-intentional human action. And it can be subdivided into three categories. Mainly, technological or industrial disasters, terrorism or violence, and lastly, complex humanitarian emergencies. Technological or industrial disasters. This is a disaster that is brought about by unregulated industrialization and inadequate safety standards. Examples are leaks of hazardous materials, accidental explosions, bridge or road collapses, and vehicle collisions. Terrorism or violence. This is a disaster that uses unlawful violence and intimidation against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. Thus, the threat of terrorism has also increased due to the spread of technologies involving nuclear, biological, and chemical agents used to develop weapons of mass destruction. Examples of terrorism or violence are bombs or explosions, release of chemical material, release of biological agents, release of radioactive agents, multiple or massive shooting, and lastly, mutinies. Complex humanitarian emergencies. This disaster is a result of international or civil war where a large number of people are being displaced from their home. This results to lack of personal safety and disruption of basic infrastructure. Also, in here, communities are left stranded and isolated in their own homes, unable to access for any assistance. Examples: conflicts or wars, genocide or killing of a large group of people. Determining factors of the damage caused by disaster: geographical location, climate, Earth-specific characteristics. Level of vulnerability. Note that these determining factors affect generally the psychological, social, economic, political, and ethnical state of the affected area. First, the geographical location. The Philippines is one of the higher risk countries for natural disasters, since it is located along the Pacific Ring of Fire in the typhoon belt. The next one is the climate. The Philippines lie in the world's most cyclone-prone region, averaging 19 to 20 cyclones each year, of which 7 to 9 make landfall. It is highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, including sea level rise, increased frequency of extreme weather events, rising temperatures, and extreme rainfall. The next factor is the Earth-specific characteristics. It has a solid and active surface with mountains, valleys, canyons, plains, and so much more. Earth is special because it is an ocean planet. Water covers 70% of the Earth's surface. Therefore, different disasters can occur such as typhoon and tsunami. Let's now talk about the Philippines' level of vulnerability. The first one is the presence of the warm ocean waters. The Philippines is located just above the equator. The Philippines faces the western Pacific without much else in the way to take the force of the storms before they make landfall. Therefore, those warm equatorial waters power storms, about 20 typhoons a year. The second one is the coastal homes. According to the World Bank, it was estimated that a lot of people live on low-lying coastal islands in the Philippines, with more than 60% of the population living in coastal zones. This leads the citizens at risk of some sort of disaster, like storm surge and tsunami. The next one is the deforestation. In the past typhoons, mudslides have killed many storm survivors in the Philippines. This is due to the fact that hillside denuded of trees have fewer roots to hold them together, which can lead to mudslides when they are hit by sudden huge outbursts of rain. The next one is the Ring of Fire. The Philippines rests on the Pacific's earthquake and volcano Ring of Fire, as discussed a while ago. And lastly, the underdevelopment. Over the long term, the Manila Observatory says that the combination of poverty and population shifts put the Philippines among the top 10 worldwide nations at risk of coastal flooding. So a while ago, we used to articulate the term risk. So this term has something to do with our topic for today. Now, let us first define the term risk. According to the UNISDR 2009, risk is the combination of the probability of an event and its negative consequences. It is usually associated with the degree to which humans cannot cope with a situation. Therefore, risk is uncertain. Yet, it can put an individual to a certain danger. It is said that the term risk is associated with our coping skills or the ability to take an action and survive in a certain problem. Therefore, poor coping skills can lead us to greater risk. However, with a very stable coping skills, one can lessen or prevent the risk for something unfavorable. Now, let us try to coin the term risk to disaster. Let's talk about disaster risk. Disaster risk is a potential disaster losses in lives, health status, livelihoods, assets, and services which could occur in a community or society over some specified future time period. Let's go back to the term potential. Always remember that when we are talking about disaster risk, the damage to life or property is not yet happening. Yet, it is still possible to happen. when not properly intervened. Disaster risk is a product of the possible damage caused by a hazard due to the vulnerability within a community. Note that high level of vulnerability is equivalent to a higher risk for disaster. It can also be determined by the presence of three variables. The first one is the hazard. There must be the presence of hazard, something that will put some danger to life or property. The next one is the vulnerability, or the proneness to a hazard. If people are vulnerable, if they are weak and cannot cope up well with danger, therefore, disaster can happen. Now that we have already defined disaster, why do you think it is important for us to study and understand? Do you have any idea? Yes, it is essential in order for us to prepare and prevent a certain disaster. A while ago, we said that disaster risk is an event that may cause harm to life and property. But again, this situation can still be prevented, or damages can be still lessened if we are ready and we know what to do on the time that it may happen. Because we are already done with our lesson for today, let's get your mind moving. For our first activity, Fix Me. Instruction: arrange the given jumbled letters to identify the correct terminology. The definition will help you to derive the correct answer. Answering this activity, are you ready? Let's begin. A sudden calamitous event bringing great damage, loss, destruction, and devastation. Time's up! The correct answer is disaster. Did you get the correct answer? Great! Next question. A path along the Pacific Ocean characterized by active volcanoes and frequent earthquakes. Time's up! The correct answer is Ring of Fire. Did you get the correct answer? Good job! This is an event causing great and often sudden damage or distress. Time's up! The correct answer is calamity. Did you get it correct? Is it correct? Very good! Shaking of earth caused by waves moving on and below the earth's surface. Time's up! The correct answer, earthquake. Did you get it right? Outstanding! This happens when lava and gas are discharged from a volcanic vent. Time's up! The correct answer, volcanic eruption. Did you get it right? Superb! This is the largest and deepest of Earth's oceanic divisions. Time's up! The correct answer is Pacific Ocean. Did you get it correct? Superb! A type type of tropical cyclone or severe tropical storm. Time's up! The correct answer, typhoon. Did you get it correct? Excellent! This is a natural event such as flood, earthquake, or hurricane that causes great damage or loss of life. Time's up! And the correct answer is natural disaster. Did you get it correct? Great job! This is a sudden or great misfortune or failure. Time's up! And the correct answer is destruction. Did you get it right? Bravo! This is caused by man, in which major direct causes are identifiable, intentional or non-intentional human actions. Time's up! And the correct answer is man-made disaster. Did you get it right? Great job! Activity number 2. Understanding natural and man-made disaster. Instruction. Identify the given set of images that will be flashed on the screen. Tell me if it is natural disaster or man-made disaster. First image. Super Typhoon Haiyan devastates Tacloban City. Is it natural disaster or man-made disaster? And the correct answer is natural disaster. Did you get it correct? Very good! Second image. The military convoy. Is it natural disaster or man-made disaster? And the correct answer is man-made disaster. Did you get it right? Bravo! Third image. Eruption of Mayon volcano. Is it a natural disaster or a man-made disaster? And the correct answer is natural disaster. Did you get it correct? Excellent! Fourth image. Toxic metal barrel. Is it natural disaster or man-made disaster? And the correct answer is man-made disaster. Did you get the correct answer? Outstanding! Now, based on the presented image, how will you differentiate natural disaster from man-made disaster? That's right! To make it simple, natural disaster is caused by natural forces, and man-made disaster is caused by man. Let us now proceed to activity number 3. Complete the table. Given the table, give a natural disaster and man-made disaster you experience within your locality, or you had heard from the news recently. What makes it natural disaster and what makes it man-made disaster? Provide an explanation and cite its effects. Do it in your yellow pad. To be submitted during the retrieval of modules. Have you really learned in our class today? Now, it's time to get your paper and pen, and let's begin our assessment. Instruction. Right after every question, choose and write the letter of your best answer in your yellow pad. Revelation of the correct answer will be done before flashing the next question. Check your own work and be honest. Submit your quiz during the retrieval of modules. Good luck! Number 1. Which of the following is a sudden, calamitous event bringing great damage, loss, destruction, and devastation to life and property? A. Disaster. B. Hazard. D. Phenomenon. D. Risk. Time's up. And the correct answer is A. Disaster. Number 2. A natural disaster can be a blank. A. Phenomenon. B. Terrorism or violence. C. Technological or industrial issues. D. Complex humanitarian emergencies. Time's up. The correct answer, letter B, terrorism or violence. Number 3. All of the following are the effects of disasters, except A. Can destroy health infrastructure. B. Can cause an unexpected number of deaths. C. Can have adverse effects on the environment. D. Can cause the ability of every species to reproduce. Time's up. The correct answer, D. Can cause the ability of every species to reproduce. Number 4. It is called as the Circum-Pacific Belt, the zone of earthquakes surrounding the Pacific Ocean where about 99% of the world's earthquake occurs. Letter A. Drought. B. Ring of Fire. C. Subsidence. D. Bermuda Triangle. Time's up. The correct answer, letter B, Ring of Fire. Number 5. Which of the following is not an example of man-caused hazard? Letter A, mutiny. B, earthquake. C, genocide. D, bombs or explosions. Time's up. The correct answer, letter B, earthquake. Number 6. It is defined as the source of danger and something that may cause injury or harm. It is also the uncertain cause of events in a country. Letter A, disaster. B, risk. C, hazard. D, phenomenon. Time's up. The correct answer, C, hazard. Number 7. Which of the following category is a man-made hazard? A. Storm surges. B. Flooded coastal areas. C. Landslide on mining sites. D. Oil spills from shipping boat. Time's up. The correct answer? Letter D. Oil spills from shipping boat. Number 8. Disaster has a great impact on which of the following aspect? Letter A. Bacteria. B. Human. C. Invention. Or D. Technology. Time's up. The correct answer? B. Human. Number 9. There are many impacts of disaster. On what impact it will fall if a person is suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome? Letter A. Physical well-being impact. B. Mental well-being impact. C. Social well-being impact. Or letter D. None of the above. Time's up. The correct answer? Letter B. Mental well-being impact. Number 10. During the initial stage of a disaster, almost all means of transportation within the community are disrupted by broken bridges, roads, and streets that are rendered impassable by landslide or floods. The restricted mobility of vehicles make rescue and other emergency operations doubly difficult. What is this impact or effect of disaster? Letter A. Economic impact. B. Social and political impact. C. Damage to critical facilities. D. Disruption of transportation. Time's up. The correct answer? Letter D. Disruption of transportation. Well done! Now we are finished with our quiz. How well did you go? Hope that you have done great. Now that we are already done with our lesson for today, here is an additional activity for you to accomplish. In your yellow pad, kindly answer this question and submit it during the retrieval of modules. Do you think you are relatively well prepared when a disaster might affect your community, either natural or man-made, as well as to its effects? List down 5 important things that you need to prepare in order to lessen the possible danger that you and your family might encounter when a disaster strikes. Now, before we end our session today, let me first congratulate everyone for a job well done. Hope that you really had fun learning today.
I know we had our differences, but today, I just want to tell you.
Hey, congratulations, it's a celebration. Party all day, I know you've been waiting. Congratulations, it's a celebration. I just want to tell you that I think that you're...
Let us now bow our head and feel the holy presence of God. Dear Lord, thank you for the chance we are gathered here today to learn more about the things that surrounds us. Thank you for giving us inspiration and wisdom for us to focus and understand the topics that were presented. May we apply our learnings in our day-to-day living. This we ask in Jesus' name.
This is Mama Joy signing off, wishing you a great day full of learnings.